All right, let's jump right into this explainer. When most of us think about digital marketing strategy, we usually skip straight to the flashy stuff, right? The highly targeted campaigns, hyper-personalized emails, those massive complex analytics dashboards. But today, we're going to look at what sits directly beneath all of that. We're talking about data ethics, compliance, and sustainability. I like to call this the governance layer. And honestly, it is not just some boring legal footnote or a compliance checkbox you frantically tick right before a campaign goes live. This layer is absolutely crucial. It's the foundation that makes modern marketing possible at all, and without it, the whole shebang eventually collapses. To really get why this matters, let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago, there was this incredibly popular Canadian coffee app. You know the drill: order your morning coffee ahead of time, grab your loyalty points, and skip the massive line. Millions of people had this thing on their phones, and it felt completely harmless. But then, privacy regulators took a peek under the hood. And what did they find? They discovered the app wasn't just tracking users when they ordered a coffee. It was logging where they lived, where they worked, and where they traveled, literally even when the app was closed and just sitting in their pockets. None of that data was actually needed to sell a cup of coffee. Regulators bluntly stated the company was collecting way more than it could ever justify. But here's the thing I really want you to sit with. Nobody in that story woke up and decided to be evil. That story brilliantly illustrates how perfectly reasonable decisions made by completely siloed teams can unintentionally snowball into a massive public relations and legal disaster. Just think about how it happens. Step 1, the marketing team simply wants better, more tailored personalization. Step 2, the analytics team goes, great, to do that we need richer data. Step 3, the engineers realize, hey, we have the technical ability to track location in the background, so let's just turn it on. Every single one of those individual decisions probably felt entirely logical inside those meeting rooms. But when you add up all those small, well-intentioned choices, the sum becomes a massive privacy violation. That gap between this step feels fine and, whoops, we just broke the law, is exactly why we need a governance layer.
So this demands a massive paradigm shift from us. In digital marketing, we've been conditioned for years to think that data is our most valuable asset. Actually, scratch that, it's not. Your real asset isn't the data you collect. It is the incredibly scarce, ridiculously fragile trust of your customers. Think about it for a second. Today, data is incredibly easy to get. Every click, every scroll, every online purchase throws off a huge amount of data exhaust. It's totally plentiful. What's actually scarce, what is genuinely hard to build and terrifyingly easy to lose, is a customer's willingness to let you use that data. We call this trust your social license to operate. It's basically the informal permission that society gives your business to do what you do. You cannot buy this in a marketplace. You literally cannot engineer it with some clever algorithm. You can only earn it over time through consistent, respectful behavior. And the scary part? You can burn it to the ground in a single afternoon if you mishandle customer information. So as we dig into ethics, compliance, and sustainability today, remember, we're not talking about annoying roadblocks meant to slow you down. We're talking about the 3 essential ways you protect the one resource that keeps your marketing alive. Let's move into our first pillar of modern marketing governance: ethics.
Ethics is where all the hard, subjective decisions are made, way before the lawyers ever get involved. The crucial point here is that just because a data practice is legally permissible, that absolutely does not mean it's right. The law is simply the floor. It's the bare minimum standard. Ethics is everything above it. Almost every single data decision in marketing requires a trade-off between benefit and harm. Take personalization, for instance. A well-targeted recommendation is fantastic. It saves time and shows customers products they genuinely want. But push that exact same machinery just a little bit further, and it suddenly becomes what customers immediately label as creepy. We all know that feeling of an ad relentlessly stalking you across the internet, right? The line between helpful and creepy isn't written in any legal textbook. It's a subjective ethical judgment, and the burden of making that call falls directly on us as marketers.
To make those judgments, you always have to ask yourself, who benefits from this data use and who might be harmed? Let's apply this ethical lens to the very real danger of AI bias. Bias loves to hide inside systems that look perfectly objective on the surface. If an AI tool is trained on data that doesn't accurately represent everyone, it's not going to work equally well for everyone. There was a well-known documented failure where certain algorithms actually perform worse for people with darker skin tones, simply because the original training data totally underrepresented them. Now, if that's a step counter app, okay, it's annoying. But what if that exact same bias system is deciding who gets shown a lucrative job ad or who qualifies for a crucial financial product? That quiet little technical gap suddenly becomes a massive fairness problem that actively discriminates against real people. I really want you to remember this concept. Facts are produced, not given. Metrics, segmentations, automated high-value customer scores, they don't just magically fall from the sky. Somebody, a human being with a coffee and a tight deadline, sat in a room and chose what to measure, whose data to include, and what the cutoff thresholds would be. Ethics means taking full responsibility for those human choices, instead of just throwing your hands up and saying, well, hey, the algorithm said so. Ask yourself, am I treating the people in my dataset as actual human beings, or just as rows on a spreadsheet? We are now shifting from the ethical ceiling to the legal floor as we explore our second pillar, compliance.
Let's look at compliance specifically within the Canadian market context. Now, if you're relying on instincts built from the much looser US market, you're in for a serious shock, because Canada's laws are very distinct and often much stricter. First up, we have PIPEDA from the year 2000. This is the federal workhorse. It's principles-based, which means it focuses on outcomes and consent rather than handing you a rigid, itemized rulebook. Then we have CASL, Canada's anti-spam legislation from 2014. If you send emails, texts, or social DMs for commercial reasons, CASL is your master. You generally need explicit consent first, you absolutely must identify yourself clearly, and you have to honor unsubscribes within 10 business days. Finally, there's Quebec's Law 25, which rolled out recently. It is currently the most demanding privacy regime in the country. It requires clear opt-in consent for sensitive data and demands total transparency when automated systems make decisions about people.
$10 million. That is the maximum penalty a business can face for violating CASL. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. If you assume Canadian regulators are passive, or if you think US-style opt-out marketing tactics will just fly here, you are putting your entire organization at massive financial risk. Oh, and don't forget the Competition Act, which targets false or misleading marketing claims. Making sure your creative copy is actually truthful isn't just an ethical issue, it's a very strict legal compliance issue, for sure.
Now, we have to talk about the future, specifically Bill C-27 and AIDA, the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act. This was a massive proposed overhaul to Canada's privacy and AI laws that would have introduced fines as high as $25 million. But due to Parliament proroguing and an election, this bill died in early 2025. It is not currently enacted law. So why on earth are we talking about a dead bill? Well, a lot of outdated study guides still treat it as active law, and you really need to know the difference. But more importantly, the ideas in that bill didn't just vanish into thin air. Regulators are already acting as if these stronger AI accountability standards are inevitably coming. Smart strategists build their systems for where the puck is going, not where it is today. If you wait for a new law to officially pass before you start preparing, you're going to be way too late. Here's a crucial point. Just because a technology like an ad pixel is completely normal, it absolutely does not make legal consent optional. Take this recent real-world example. A major Canadian retailer was investigated because they were sharing customer e-receipt data with a massive social media platform just to improve ad targeting. The tools they used were standard tracking pixels. Their intent was ordinary, everyday marketing. But the regulators stepped in and ruled that the customer consent was totally inadequate. The defense of, but everybody uses this tracking pixel, holds absolutely zero weight in a legal setting. Normalizing a technology doesn't magically erase your compliance obligations. Let's move on and see how this builds into our third and maybe most surprising pillar of marketing, sustainability. When you hear the word sustainability in a marketing context, you might be a little confused, but it has two urgent meanings today. The first is highly physical and environmental, and it's become vastly more important with the explosion of generative AI. Every single time you run a massive personalization engine, train a language model, or generate thousands of content variants, that heavy computation happens in very real physical data centers. These centers consume staggering amounts of electricity and massive amounts of water just to keep the servers cool. Our environmental footprint is no longer invisible. You really have to ask yourself, are we burning this energy because it genuinely creates value for the customer, or just because we have the budget to do it? The second meaning of sustainability is about the longevity of your practice. Basically, how long can you keep marketing this way before your audience completely turns on you? This brings us to a really stark contrast in mindsets. You can treat data in an extractive way, basically strip mining your customers by taking as much as you possibly can, using it aggressively, and worrying about the fallout later. And hey, it works for a little while. But eventually, trust depletes, people opt out, regulators knock on your door, and your data well runs completely dry. The alternative is regenerative marketing. This means collecting only the data you actually need, being incredibly transparent about it, and delivering so much value back to the customer that they're genuinely glad they shared it with you. In a regenerative model, treating data ethically is like farming. Trust doesn't deplete, it continually renews and grows over time. Okay, let's dive into this final section, the governance layer, and see how it ties all this together in the real world. Governance is the definitive layer where you make deliberate, on-the-record decisions. It's not a reactive tech choice. It's a proactive framework that forces you to answer the hard questions. What data do we collect? Why are we collecting it? And who is accountable? Look at how different industries apply this. When a commerce giant like Shopify builds AI features, governance dictates exactly what merchant data those features can access. When a major bank like RBC deploys AI models, governance ensures the AI isn't just powerful, but highly explainable and fair so they avoid bias. When an insurer like Manulife uses data, governance ensures they meet strict rules like Quebec's transparency laws. And when an airline like WestJet looks at AI dynamic pricing, governance forces them to ask, at what point does responsive pricing cross the line into manipulative pricing? Governance ensures these companies ask the right questions long before a crisis ever happens. I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with the ultimate test of a sustainable strategy. Stop asking, what can we legally get away with? Instead, ask yourselves this. If our customers could see absolutely everything we do with their data behind closed doors, would they still trust us? If the answer is a confident yes, then you are practicing regenerative, ethical marketing. But if you aren't sure, or if the answer is no, well, then that is exactly where your real work begins.